Την πρώτη μου πίπα τη βάζω πορτοκαλί.
Άλλη μόνο, δεν ήταν σημαντική στιγμή.
Καλά, δεν ήταν και plot point. Οπότε, η πρώτη πράξη τελειώνει με το coming out στη μάνα μου. Η δεύτερη με την απόφαση να γίνω ηθοποιός. Και για φινάλε... Με παρακολουθείς?
Ναι.
Λέω, για φινάλε έχουμε την πρώτη μέρα στη σχολή. Τη νέα αρχή, τον πρώτο γκέι φίλο.
Και όχι μόνο, φίλος. Στο έχω ξαναπεί, ήσουν πάρα πολύ τυχερός που βρήκες έναν άνθρωπο να έχει λύσει τα θέματά του. Εγώ στην ηλικία σου ήμουν τελείως μόνος. Δεν είχα κανέναν.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ross, and welcome to Dekkoo In Depth, where we talk a little bit deeper with some of the most exciting creators working with us here at Dekkoo. And today we have a treat. We have the writer, director of the new film, The Summer With Carmen. Please welcome Zacharias Mavroeidis. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, nice having me. Thanks for hosting me.
Can you tell us a little bit about, especially Greece's queer world?
Well, it goes centuries back, as we all know. So I don't know what you're talking. You're talking about modern Greece, I guess, right?
Yeah. I suppose modern Greece. I'm sure a lot of our viewers know about ancient Greece. So yeah, let's talk about
Let's
modern
leave
Greece.
the antiquity outside of of this interview.
Yeah.
It's a very broad question, but let's just focusing on the film. I can say that a big part. I mean, the film somehow is a slice of life of modern gay life today in today's Athens, and a big part of the film takes place in a beach, which is an actual place, and I mean it's a real location. It's a rocky beach at the south of Athens. Athens is the capital of Greece. This beach is called Limanaka, and it's a place where nudism and the cruising takes place, and it's a very important, let's say, landmark for the queer LGBTQ community of Athens and of Greece in general.
Λοιπόν, το τηλεφώνημα στον πάνω πρέπει να είναι plot point 1.
Plot point 1.
Ξεκάθαρο plot point 1. Μια κρίσιμη απόφαση του ήρωα με αμετάκλητες συνέπειες.
Γιατί ήταν κρίσιμη? Εγώ τον άρθηκα, ήθελα.
Ναι, αλλά κατά βάθος τρογόσουν να ανοίξει παρτίδες μαζί του.
Εγώ. Από πού και σου?
Αφού μέσα σου δεν είχε λήξει η ιστορία.
Τι λες, καλέ? Για τον πάνω δεν είχε λήξει, για μένα.
Καλά. Μπορεί.
Όχι μπορεί. Σίγουρα.
And what was it like kind of filming in this public, pretty renowned area for the queer life?
Well, it was a very challenging shooting. We shot there on early May, so the beach was not that busy yet. So we didn't have that many people to mingle with. But it was a very challenging shooting because it's a very steep and rocky beach. So it was a small production, so we couldn't build anything there to have a flat surfaces to walk around or to have the camera. So basically, it was a camera on a tripod, and all the crew was climbing up and down trying to find a spot to sit and do their work. And on top, the sound crew really struggled because the waves make noise, the wind makes noise, and the actors were naked, so you couldn't actually put a mic on them. So anyway, it was a very challenging shooting for all the departments. But somehow, shooting outside right next to the sea, and whenever you feel frustrated, you just lift your eyes and you see the horizon. Somehow, this balances the struggle there. So it was a very challenging shooting, but a very pleasurable as well.
You know, watching it, I did not even think about that with the microphones, that you just had to kind of be very creative with that.
Yes.
Outside of your kind of filmography, can you tell me a little bit about what the Greek queer cinema scene is like?
It's always a challenge to try to make a history of queer cinema, because somehow the more you go to the past, the more this fades into mainstream films that were not exactly queer but became important for the queer community. I think if I had to name one film, which I think is very, very, very important for the Greek queer cinema, that is it's a film called Strela. It's I think 2009 by Panos Koutras. The film The Summer with Carmen makes a very bold reference to this film at the middle of the story. And the protagonist of that film does a cameo in The Summer with Carmen. He's the guy cleaning some stairs at some point. For people who know the film, they can make a very big connection there. We don't have a very consistent production of queer films in Greece. Although I have a feeling that this might change as the new generation is really way more vocative about identity issues.
Yeah, this is kind of my first real deep dive into kind of modern Greek cinema, and I was very intrigued that you filmed the Pride sequence during an actual Pride parade, and it was really wonderful to see this huge group of people coming together, and you kind of just filmed right in the middle of that. So that was very interesting to me to see this kind of modern example that I hadn't really thought of before for Greece. I know that this movie was very much inspired by you and your friend, I believe. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like trying to fictionalize or make a film out of your real experiences?
I think the film kind of narrates its own creation, basically. So I did wrote the script of this film together with Xenophotos Halatsis, who's a very good friend of mine, very close friend, and it was inspired by some real events.
Γεννήθηκα Χριστούγεννα του 1994 στο κέντρο υγείας Καστελόριζου. Ένα μικρό ακριτικό νησί στην άκρη της Ελλάδας. Ένα νησί που ποτέ δεν χωρούσε στο χάρτη της χώρας. Ένα νησί περισεβούμενο. Κάπως έτσι ένιωθα κι εγώ ως μέλος της μικρής ασφικτικής κοινωνίας μας. Περισεβούμενος, παράτερος, περιττός. Ο πατέρας μου ήταν αρχικελευστής σε γκαζάδικο και έλειπε μήνες στις θάλασσες. Μα κι όταν έπιανε στεριά ήταν και πάλι σαν να λείπει ταξίδι. Αμήχανος, απόμακρος, απροσπέλαστος. Δεν ήξερε τι να κάνει μαζί μου, γιατί από μικρός φαινόταν πως ήμουν διαφορετικός. Φαινόταν πως ήμουν αδερφή. Να συνεχίσω.
Originally, the first, let's say, draft of the film was not a film within a film. It was a story of a love story, let's say. And there was just a scene at the beginning and at the end of the film where the two characters were somehow recalling it. But progressively, as we worked together, and the conflicts we had trying to turn, the real events into fiction were so interesting, and somehow it was a very surreal writing experience, because we would meet to work and we would discuss, fight or disagree, etc. And after a couple of weeks, what had happened in our actual meeting suddenly had slipped inside the story and had become a script, a scene in the actual script. So yes, the whole collaboration of the two friends is something that progressively grew and became basically the spine of the story. And along with that, somehow the theme of the film moved towards friendships and queer friendships in particular, which I think is it's a very interesting kind of relationship that can be way more explored from narratives, because like friendships between gay men, they have all the elements that the friendships between straight men have. So like they can be competitive or a bit cocky, or also they can be very playful, very boyish, but at the same time, they are potential lovers. There's always this, either it happened or might happen or it never happened, but it's a possibility. But most important, they're also family, like all queer friendships. They are quite often they constitute family relationships, because together with our queer friends, we might spend our holidays, we might go to funerals, So I wanted through this film to explore all these layers of these friendships.
One thing I really appreciated about the film is this idea of, do people change, or can they kind of notice themselves changing, or do we kind of stay the same way? And I'm curious, how have you seen your filmmaking change and stay the same while making The Summer with Carmen?
My filmmaking or my identity, myself, my psychology?
I'm curious about your filmmaking, but I mean, if your psychology comes to mind and you're comfortable sharing that, I would love to hear that as well.
I mean, I think every films take so much time to make, and so much effort, but basically so much time. So, you know, if it takes like 4 or 5 years, at least, you know, making films in Greece usually lasts from 4 years to 7 years. So, and you're so much involved in this process, so somehow it reflects a period of your life, and the whole process of making a film. I mean, for me, I feel somehow I found a certain confidence in, for example, in my previous films, I would go to shoot and I would be really overly prepared and, you know, too much scheduling. In this one, I was more spontaneous. Somehow, maybe I felt the confidence, or I don't know, maybe it was part the project called for it, but I felt free to explore a bit more for.
L'amour est un oiseau rebelle que nul ne peut apprivoiser. Et c'est bien Nova qu'on l'appelle, si lui convient de refuser.
Ωραίο το musical, αλλά πανάκριβο. Το Σαν Σεμπαστιάν.
Άντε πάλι με το Σαν Σεμπαστιάν.
Ρε Δημοσθένη, δεν θέλω να φτάσω 40 για να κάνω την πρώτη μεγάλου μήκους μου.
Εντάξει, δεν σε πήραν και τα χρόνια.
Τι λες, ο Ξαβιέ Ντολάν είχε κάνει 4 μεγάλου μήκους στην ηλικία μου.
Οκ, παπά σου.
I think that the film has a lot of freedom in playing with many narrative elements, making jokes, and being sensitive. You know, I think it has a freedom which is of expression, which is easy to lose as you become more and more professional, and you know.
And I think that's something we all kind of struggle with for our entire lives. And well, one way that this movie is very playful is the music. You worked with your composer to almost mash together classical music as well as more traditional Greek sound. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, when I was writing the film and afterwards in the editing, somehow I had a lot of Baroque music in my head. I also like very famous arias. So I didn't think a lot about it. Why was this so? But somehow it fitted, and I think that the whole cruising setting of the film, although the film has nothing to do with cruising, it's just set in a cruising beach. I'm just making this clear for your audience. You know, it's not a film about cruising. It's just set in such a beach.
Εσένα δηλαδή δεν σε πονούσε που έληξε η σχέση?
Φυσικά και με πονούσε. Αλλά η ζωή συνεχίζεται. Και το ότι χωρίσαμε δεν σημαίνει ότι πρέπει να χάσουμε κάθε επαφή.
Οκ, πάω σου.
Να σου πω, δεν θα με βγάλει σε καμιά καημένη αδερφή που δεν μπορεί να ξεπεράσει τον χωρισμό.
Εγώ πάντως δεν έχω κανένα θέμα με τις καημένες αδερφές.
Οκ, μπράβο σου. Απλά δεν νομίζω ότι ψάχνει αυτό ο Ζαν Σεμπαστιάν.
You know, if you take the sensuality glasses out and you see it from a bit of a distance, it's kind of like a big theater play. There's something, an overacting there of people who passing by. So all this somehow really brings in my head, you know, like a big operas, you know, where all the actors are in the square and walking past by. And this somehow is how the idea behind the very first scene of the film, where we are introduced to this place, which is a bit like a Baroque court, you know, like a king's court in the Baroque era. And so when we started to working with my music composer Ted Reglis, we had this as a material, Baroque music, and then we also wanted to play with Greek music and rebetiko, which is it's a music that it's popular. It's kind of masculine. It has a masculine tradition, and we found a very funny connection between Baroque and rebetiko, which otherwise have zero connection. Is that the main instrument of rebetiko is bouzouki, the one you hear in Zorba the Greek, the famous tune. And the main instrument of Baroque is, or let's say the most identifiable, is the harpsichord. And apparently the two have a very similar sound. It's very easy to mix bouzouki with harpsichord. So this was a departure point of a blend of these two genres. And someone who is really somehow who has a trained ear and can tell, I think there are plenty of jokes in the score of the film that have to do with, having a harpsichord playing a bouzouki tune and vice versa. And behind this, I guess this blend is it's kind of an allegory about the cruising the cruising space in general, because I think that cruising places, they are sensual, they are places where you can go and have impersonal sex, but this is a small part of what takes place there. It's also a place where a trans person can go and have swim without feeling that they're drawing attention to them. Or it's a place where two queer boys can go and be do fashion shows in the beach without again feeling that they are calling attention to themselves. In a way, I think that cruising places, cruising beaches are kind of like safe spaces where people, all the spectrum of the queer community can meet. And actually, I think in cruising places, you do see the whole spectrum of the queer community, because even in a gay bar, there is some kind of a filtering, social class or budget, And in these places, these are like ephemeral societies that the queer community unites for a day to enjoy the sea and do whatever each one wants. And by the end of the day, they depart. So somehow, to sum up, I think the film pays justice to cruising places by portraying a day in such a beach.
I really hear what you're saying now that you kind of walked me through the context of that beach, because it is a place where you showed in the film that people could relax, be themselves, but you're right that there is a performance to it too. People that are, and the characters comment on it, that somebody is making really over-the-top sounds or are drawing a lot of attention to themselves to be approached, but that is fascinating, that it is a space that is welcoming to all, that doesn't matter how much you make or who you are or how you identify. So that is fascinating. And really my last question, just because we haven't really talked about Carmen, is how was it working with Carmen, the dog, throughout this process?
Well, first of all, I must say that some people who go to see the film without knowing who is Carmen, they have a very nice surprise. So this is kind of a spoiler alert,
That's a good point. We'll have to put a spoiler ahead.
Make a spoiler alert about Carmen.
Yeah.
In Hollywood, when you have a dog playing, you always get a purebred dog because you don't have one dog in the shooting. You have 8 Labradors, and you shoot one scene, one take with the first one, then the next one, because dogs get tired, etc. In Greece, of course, there's not such a big industry, and we don't have so many trained dogs. And on top, we couldn't. There was no way we could have a trained, like a purebred dog for the part of Carmen. It should be a mixed race dog. So we were very lucky to find Nala. That's the actual name of the dog. We found her I think 2 weeks before shooting. We were about to postpone the shooting because we didn't have the dog. And she was ideal. She had this amazing trait, the ears that are constantly in 90 degrees square, either this like that. But there was one big problem, that her parents was a lesbian couple, both small-sized women, maybe kind of introvert. Anyway, the thing is that the dog was not accustomed to be around men at all. And of course, Yorgos is not the main character. Yorgos Tsiadoulas, he's like tall, hairy, etc. She, like the first time they met, the dog was completely terrified of him. So basically, the last 2 weeks prior to shooting, I think Yorgos spent more time rehearsing, or kind of rehearsing with the dog in order to get accustomed to each other than with his partners. But in the end, I think we were very lucky to have this dog. I think she deserves a dog Oscar.
Εδώ είσαι εσύ. Μωρή παιδιά του παπάς. Ούτε καν.
Μαρία, θα έρθεις ή θα με κρεμάσεις? Πας καλά ρε Μαρία. Και εγώ που θα την αφήσω τώρα? Δεν μπορώ να την πάρω μαζί. Καλά, γάμα το. Μια ζωή με κρεμάς. Κάτω μωρή, τι σου είπα? Στο κρεβάτι σου.
Τι έγινε, καλέ?
Η μαλακισμένη αδερφή μου. Είχαμε πει να κρατήσει την Κάρμεν μέχρι το βράδυ και εκείνη πήγε για ούζα στην Ανάβησο, έγινε γκολ και τώρα δεν μπορεί να γυρίσει πίσω.
Αμάρε, παιδί με αυτή η κοπέλα.
Ρε πούστη μου. Έχουμε ένα τραπέζι με κάτι βουλευτές από την περιφέρεια και δεν θέλω να την αφήσω μόνη της τόσες ώρες. Θα μου τα κάνει πάλι μουνή.
Δεν έχεις κανένα να την κρατήσει?
Ποιον άγχο ρε Δημοσθένη?
Καλά, τι ξεδιάντροπος. Δεν είχε άλλο άνθρωπο να πασάρει του σκύλου.
Τον ξέρεις τον Πάνο. Ούτε πολλούς φίλους έχει, ούτε εγκόμενο προφανώς έχει. Τον κρέμασε και η κρασογανάτα.
Οπότε τι πιο λογικό να φορτώσει το σκυλί στον πρώην του.
Δεν μου τη φόρτωσε, εγώ προσφέρθηκα.
Γιατί?
Αφού με εξυπηρέτησε και αυτός με τον άρθηκα. Θα μας δώσει και το κρεβάτι. Σιγά μωρέ, μέχρι το βράδυ είναι. Αφού είναι καλή. Κάρμεν, καλή δεν είσαι?
I agree with you. Yeah, and you know, the Carmen the dog is just one small part of this wonderful movie, The Summer with Carmen. You can watch it right now on Dekkoo. My thank you so much for joining us, director, writer of The Summer with Carmen, Zacharias Mavroeidis. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for hosting me.
And we will see you next time on the next edition of Dekkoo in Depth.